Hey guys, and welcome to the 11th video in the series, Becoming Well Read. It's a series where I take one of the books on my shelf, read it, and talk about it a little bit in front of a camera in an attempt to become well read. In the last video, the 10th one, we actually talked about The Shining by Stephen King. Crazy guy in a hotel with his family tries to kill them. That's basically the summary for that. But in this video, we're going to talk about Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame Smith. The copyright for this book was in 2010, and so it's one of the more recent books I've read this year. In this book, we go through Abraham Lincoln, yes, the President of the United States. And it's basically a summary of his life, but with a crazy fictional twist. So what happens in this book is that at a very young age, Abraham Lincoln witnesses someone coming into his house and poisoning his mother. And he witnesses his mother's death, and it's a very traumatic experience for him. As a very young boy, he liked to write a journal, and this book is basically his journal retold. And we see that he comes to learn that his mother died due to being fed the blood of a vampire. That's when this book goes on a crazy revenge sort of story. Abraham Lincoln wants to get revenge for the death of his mother, and he knows exactly who did it. And so he tries to go after that person and fails. What happens is he didn't really know the proper way to go after a vampire, and so someone who finds him trains him how to do it. That guy's name was Henry, and Henry took Abraham Lincoln in and trained him little by little to become a vampire killer. Now, how does Henry know how to kill vampires? Well, he is one. Judge us not equally. That's what Henry keeps saying to Abraham Lincoln, that not all vampires are these horrible killers. And with that, we see that there's sort of like this racial backstory that not all vampires are these vicious killers of the innocent. Henry in particular, I think he only killed people that were really, really horrible, the murderers and those types of people. And so in that sense, he wasn't as bad as other vampires. Abraham Lincoln, having failed his first vampire slaughter, had to be rehabilitated by Henry. The book goes through the life of Abraham Lincoln, getting a job in a shop, getting into politics and all these things. More and more, there's a bigger story happening in the background. The bigger story is the story of slavery in the United States. And in this fictional version of Abraham Lincoln's life, the slaves were basically raised like cattle to be food for the vampires. So the white slave owners would use the slaves to mass produce food, and then they'd make themselves wealthy. And then when the slaves were older or sick or no longer useful, the vampires would come and eat them. And then so in this way, they had the protection of the vampires. And this was happening throughout the entire South. Abraham Lincoln was openly opposed to this system, but it's been a system that has gone on for a long time, and so he started to fight back with his politics. In the book, Henry knew that Abraham Lincoln was destined for something big. Not the entire presidency, but Abraham Lincoln being the person to suppress the vampire influence. That's, in this book, what the Civil War was really about. The book has its sad moments as well. Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, is not one for like the faint of heart. If you're a parent, Abraham Lincoln's kids died because of the vampire's kiss when you feed the blood of a vampire to a person who isn't a vampire. Wow, so what do I have to say as for opinions about this book? I really enjoyed reading this like twisted version, this fictional version of history, the way they used the slaves in the South as a form of, they sort of raised them like cattle for the vampires. I thought that was a very interesting twist to the history of the United States. They spoke in this book about how vampires in other countries like Transylvania were suppressed, and so when the New World, the US, started being created, they quickly gained a stronghold here, even as early as the colonization of the US. Seth Grahame Smith, the way he twisted the history to fit the narrative was very interesting. So I really didn't give too many specifics, just an overarching view of what this book was about. But at the end of this book, Abraham Lincoln, it seems like he doesn't die. it really seems like he's still alive today. Henry says, some people are just too interesting to kill, and it seems like Abraham Lincoln is now also a vampire. But remember, just not one of the vampires that are doing horrible things, just one of the vampires that are not as bad. Should you read Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter? I think if you like fictional versions of history, you should definitely read this book. The author also wrote Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and so he sort of did a twist on Pride and Prejudice, and he has some other books. I don't have them in my collection, but I would be interested in reading more of him. So that's a quick summary. I enjoyed the book for what it was. I devoured it very quickly, and so I've read this book probably in a week or two. The imagery in this book was really striking, and I really like that, being a horror fan. And also, the cover, it's not something I mentioned before when I first showed the title and cover of this book, but if you turn it around, the imagery just gets to you. And there are some places in this book where they have photographs that have been altered to look like vampires are in the photographs, or like someone's eyes are completely dark and things like that. I don't want to show you those actual things. I'm going to let you, if you read this book, experience it for your own. But yeah, that's basically Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. What am I going to read for the 12th installment of Becoming Well Read? I actually have another Stephen King book. I know, it's crazy because I read so much Stephen King here. So the next book for the series Becoming Well Read is actually Night Shift by Stephen King, and this is a collection of short stories. And so for the next video, I'm just gonna go over some of the short stories that stood out to me. Stay tuned for that. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you've read Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, please leave a comment down below and subscribe for more content like this. See you guys. Ciao.